Bad Life Podcast! You are listening to the Bad Life Podcast, your number one guide on how to run a profitable band. Here are your hosts, Pete Stannard and Adam West, the Wizard of Rock! Hello, hello! Welcome to the Band Life Podcast. I am your host, Pete Stannard, and I'm here with the Wizard of Rock himself, Mr. Adam West. Hello, sir. How are you today?
I'm all right. Not too bad, thank you very much, Pete. How's it going?
Not too bad. Not too bad. I'm good. I'm busy as ever.
Yes.
I
see.
Yeah. You see.
Yeah, I've been watching your videos.
Yeah.
They've been popping up. You've been a busy boy. Good.
If you're enjoying this podcast and you're a generous soul, which I'm sure you are, why not buy Adam and myself a cup of coffee? You could do that at buymeacoffee.com/the Band Life Podcast. Episode 15.
Wow.
Hey, we're there. We have 15. We are rocking and rolling, Adam.
Not doing too bad, are we?
We're not doing too bad. And this is actually a bit more of a focused episode, isn't it, for us?
Yeah.
I like to think that the first 15 episodes have been kind of more of a foundational thing. Yep. I think that's why they're very long.
And a lot longer, actually.
But, and a lot longer, yeah. Especially the Spotify one was supposed to be just one episode. It turned into 4 episodes.
I'm pretty sure we could end up doing a lot more than that as well, because there's a big topic in it.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. That was just scratching the surface. But I think so far what we've done is very much foundational. Now we can start digging in, because I think it was important for us to do the foundational stuff, because if we just started digging straight in, we'd be constantly having to reference that. Yeah. At least this way we can kind of go, right, we're talking about this subject. If you're not really au fait with this subject, go back to episode whatever, and that will teach you the foundation, or you educate yourself on the foundations, and then we can deep dive more into that. So this is more of a deep dive, and we are talking all things Adam West.
Are we now?
Not all things Adam West. Not all things Adam West. Yeah. Where were you born? No. No, we are going to talk about Adam's recent release, An Age of Darkness by the Shallow Souls. And we are going to talk about the band itself. We're going to talk about the release itself. And we're going to really get into the weeds of this a bit, about how you approached your marketing, how you approached the production, how you approached your sales, and all of that sort of stuff. And I'm going to be a little bit like Michael Parkinson. I feel like a bit like Parky.
Nothing wrong with Parkinson.
Just kind of ask you a few questions.
Yeah.
No, it's great. Have you heard this new podcast with Michael Parkinson?
No, I thought he was dead. Still going, is he?
He's dead. He's been dead for a number of years.
Oh, it's AI.
There's an AI.
Oh, no, not AI again.
And there's celebrities. Celebrity, yeah, it's actually quite a big thing. And I actually heard a part of it on a podcast on the Everything Else is Entertainment. Because Richard Osman, who does that podcast, he's been asked to do the interview, and he had a sample of it, and honestly, it is exactly like Michael Parkinson, even right down to like the little nuances where he would like repeat words, like he'd have a bit of a stutter and things like that.
Oh, that's scary, isn't it?
You could not tell the difference. It's scary. It's actually scary. Like it's like he's there.
So haven't you noticed like the realities of this world and AI and merging to the point where we're like, we don't know what's real anymore, do we? Honestly,
no, we're not. Well, at some point, you're not going to know. You just not going to notice the difference between
scary times,
that and it's unless it's the ghost of Michael Parkinson. but that's a different podcast.
Yeah, fuck,
But anyway, back to you, sir. I'm excited by this because I want to find out any little trade secrets that you may have.
So do I. Bit of a history of the band. Okay, well, let's have a look there. Ooh, where did it all begin? Right, so it would have been the year 2004. That's when I decided to get out there and start a band. I'd been into music a few years prior to that. 2004 was the year I decided to actually start a band, which is now the Shadow Souls. So, but before that, I was involved with a few other musicians at the time, and we were all in our like mid-20s. Obviously, at that time, I'd had a young family, so I was quite in the thick of trying to find a balance between the music and the family. The kind of origins of what is on this album really stems back from about 1991, which is the most excellent era for metal, for a lot of reasons. A lot of bands,
excellent era.
a lot of bands produced a lot of good stuff.
Bands, yeah.
And it's
that year in particular was like, you got the Black Album.
Yeah, bang on, man.
You've got the Use Your Illusions albums. You've got the Nevermind album. That's just off the top of my
all
head.
the classics. I mean, I only just found it recently. The Dio's album, Strange Highways. In '91, I was in college. I've come out of the high school. It was college basically where I was introduced to what would become the music that I would write eventually to come on this album 20 years later. And so I was in college and there's this chap come up to me. So I was getting a lift back and forth through college, and there was this chap who was in the car, and like at the time that pretty much like the last of the era of cassettes, really, where CDs were coming into play just after the 90s. But he was in the car, and he went, I got a banjo. You might want to listen to this. So they're really, really cool. And he gave me this cassette tape, and I think the only thing it had on it was just Metallica. And I still had it here for a long, long time. It's probably buried up in the attic somewhere.
Was it?
Yeah. It was
written like that, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's definitely like that. I don't think they were using that. Yeah, they were using that logo. So anyway, so he gives me this cassette tape, and I take it home and listen to it on my old 80s cassette player that I had. So I put it on there, right? And as soon as I press play, I think the opening track was either Enter Sandman or the other track on the B-side of the album. And as soon as they come on, I was like, what is this? Like, because, and that's what changed my life really, was being handed that cassette.
And that was the Black album.
And that was the Black album, yeah.
Yeah, so you got into Metallica relatively late, because that's a fourth album?
Yeah. So in the very early days, I was into a lot of different music. And to be honest, I hadn't really found the heart and soul of what I was... Well, I hadn't found what my heart and soul was really looking for. And that was the sort of turning point for me, really. I'd put that on, and I was just like, the production of it, the sound quality, I was just like, what is this? I really like this. And then that's what started me on my journey, looking for other bands that were very similar to that sort of production. It's really important for people to understand this, right? Like, you have to invest so much, and this is relevant to our album when we get into the a bit later on in the questions. But it's really important, like, for people when they go in and record an album, like, especially like with what you're doing with your clients, and you go in and you discuss how you want this album to sound, what's your outlook for it, etc. That is vitally important. I think that's maybe what's sadly lacking, because and I think this is why I rant about the Black album so much. It gets berated so much, but I'm like, look. Put aside the fact that, like, the album artwork is not tremendously amazing, all right? the production, right, and the mixing is like, I mean, I've heard some people say there's too much of this in the mix and this. I'm like, look, depending on what you look for as a musician when you listen to an album, for me, I listen to that and I'm just like, man, it hits you right there. It's heavy, it's crushing, it's powerful, and I just balanced really well, you know. And then people go, yeah, but what about like Ride the Lightning and stuff? I'm just like, well, okay, well, for me, it was just very, very tinny. That aside, where I'm going with it is that what it did for me listening to the Black Album was it was a benchmark for me to eventually write and try and produce something that almost sounded as good as that in the end. Because for me, it was a big turning point in music. That's what I decided what road I was going to go down with the music. And I always wanted something that had an emotional drive to it too. And I think there are some songs, if not all of them on that album, that actually that does that. And so it filled a lot of gaps for me at the time, this point. And that's what the catalyst really, that sort of spawned what I was trying to achieve from that point in time, from 91 to 2004 and then onwards. And it's been a long, tough road. So that's kind of like the at least for the very start origins of the band, and how I came to be what I am. If you wanna know anything else like musicians, I'll tell you. But that's kind of like where it all started for me, really. So,
so how many musicians have you had in the Shadow
I did work
overall?
I worked it out the other day. Actually, a few months ago, I worked it out, and I've had about 17 members, I think.
17. Is that why you went down the road of just a 3-piece and not a 4-piece? Because kind of. I mean, even Metallica's a 4-piece. Is that because you just find it difficult to try and actually like not control, but try and get people on side for your creative vision, I suppose? If you have less people, you got less managing to do, I suppose.
Well, I suppose,
or was there a definite kind of, no, I only want this to be a 3-piece?
No,
and that's
not
it?
at all. I mean, at one point we were a 5-piece band, and it was pretty cool. But yeah, I wouldn't say I objectively tried to manage everybody, but it's like I refer to it now as steering the ship. Like, I mean, even now the guys are like, yeah, but it's your band. I'm like, oh, I know. I said, but I don't really want to hear it. I'm trying to step away from that egotistical thing because I said, look, I just wanted to create music with some beautiful people, right? That had like similar ideas that we could play live. There's no egos, there's no attitude. We're just fucking nice and etc. etc. The type of stuff that everybody kind of looks for. And like, of course, you don't always get that, which is why I've had a big problem over the years, like with musicians in terms of the lineup. 3 years always seemed to work for us. Yes, it's less ego and less issues to manage. And of course, you're not just managing yourself; you're managing other people's outside commitments, which eventually, I found managing a band or organizing a band is actually a lot harder than a marriage. I found, a lot of them. Here's the thing, see, with some of the musicians I had, I mean, not a lot of them were invested. Some of them wanted to treat it as like a get together, as a hobby for just jamming and like going from that. At least with me, I came on board and I went, look, here's kind of where I want to go. I had basically a couple of goals, and really it was just to A, produce an album, and B, play a festival gig. And I've only done the one, I haven't done the festival big live festival gig yet. But and I was not interested in signing to any label at all. It never appealed to me, and it still doesn't appeal to me. I could get into that a bit later on. So like my objectives were pretty clear. I just wanted to write some music with some people, play live, and try and get something recorded.
You said like one of your goals at that point was to play a large festival. So when you say large festival, what sort of level were you kind of thinking about at that point?
1991, Russia's Casino Airfield. 500,000 people Metallica played to, mate. That was
500,000 people.
Yeah. Actually,
that's a big festival, mate.
I know, it's big ambitions. I didn't have them.
It is, but I mean, I suppose because the kind of the thing that strikes me about it is that you've got on the one hand you're saying, I'm never going to get signed. I'm not going to get signed. It's something I'm not going to do.
Yeah.
And then on the other hand, you have this other ambition of playing to 500,000 people.
Yeah, it's very unrealistic.
And generally, the two just doesn't kind of balance out. Certainly 1991.
Yeah, hey, look.
Do you know what I mean? Curious about that because that goals, those two goals, and how you were looking at that point to balance those two goals out, or is it just not a part of your train of thought at that moment?
Well, I always, I think it's always important for anybody, even in the music, to have an objective or a goal, period, right? And work hard towards hard towards it, which is what I've always done, right? I set myself a goal and a target, and I work hard towards to get it, without sacrificing too much to get to it. Now, I mean, playing that's a bucket list one. That wasn't like the sort of, when I first seen that gig, I'm like, wow, okay, that would be cool. I'm very unrealistic because there's a lot of factors in play. Yes, you have to sacrifice a lot to get there, and that's the problem I have. See, so the music for me is, it's special, it's precious, it's mine, and I'm not giving it up for anybody, and only taking 10% or even less than that. And this is what really upsets me when, you hear about stories with bands, and they're like, there's a counter argument. They're like, yeah, but look where I've got. I'm playing all these gigs and famous. I'm like, yeah, that's great, but it comes at a cost, a heavy cost, and it's not something I'm willing to do. It depends on what is on offer, as we've discussed on the podcast, and what's on the table, right? But it's difficult for me because there's a lot of what we have and own as people that is. Belongs to other people and not really us. It frustrates me when it's like, okay, so if I work hard at something and I put everything into it, am I going to be happy giving 90% of that away to somebody so I can have the 10% in order to get all that there, which is what everybody in the young musician craves? And I'm like, no, absolutely not. I don't care. And they're like, yeah, but I'm like, look, it's not worth it for me on a personal level to give all that away just to achieve that, because I've seen how it goes, right? Even with the big bands, and it's just like, yeah, I'm sorry, but like, as much as we haven't played as many venues and gigs as some of the bands, all right, we've been around and are still around and have outlived an awful lot more bands since 2004. And I consider that to be an achievement, and testament to just sticking to your guns sometimes.
Yeah, this is like your first LP, from like almost 3 decades. Yeah. Is it 3? 2 and a bit decades of a band, which as a work rate, Tool have a higher work rate than you, dude.
Yeah. Well,
they bring out an album every 10 years. Yeah. But all that aside, I mean, so why has this taken so long?
Why is it taking so long?
Mainly out of curiosity, why has this taken so long?
Well,
for you to get from point A to releasing an LP.
It's a good question. Why has it taken so long?
Why? Beyond kicking people out the band.
Okay. I think sometimes, probably now, I've looked at it and probably gone, well, maybe the universe and the way you live your life, there are certain. It happens when it happens, and there are certain things that come into play that are beyond your control, that take precedent. I mean, obviously, I had a family, so you can't put 100% in when you've got other commitments, which you should be more committed to, even though, like, at some days it's not exciting, changing nappies and stuff. And, I suppose on reflection, I look back and think, well, they were really important key parts of, should be key parts of anyone's life. And they were, obviously, but there was a lot going on. I was trying to manage a band and regular practices and a young family and work full time. And, at mid-20s, that's a lot to take on. When the band started gigging, probably 2005 or 6 onwards, we took some time to look at it and go, okay, what's more important here? Because at that time, obviously, I met Tyrone. He came on about 2005. He worked with me right up until a couple of years ago, actually. And then we had some disagreements, and that was the end of that. We were like, okay, so what are we going to do? We're going to record, or we're going to play live? And so we focused more on doing the live. And it was always a case of, like, you can't really do the both. There's always going to be a sacrifice. And if you do the both, it's going to be tough. And this was coming from him back then. I'm just like, oh, okay. And it is tough to do the two, because, man, you got, it's like, well, you still got to work and you still got family commitments. So a lot of the early days of the band was focusing on doing a lot of live shows. So we played a lot of live shows. We played as many venues as we could in our local area, and a little beyond. So that when we did that for quite a few years, and got the name out there. And then we got to a point, it's like, well, look, with these songs we're playing, we're going to get them recorded. It's like, well, let's do an EP. So we did a live EP in the studio with some mics, and that became our sort of official EP at the time. And that was really the only thing we really managed to get down recorded-wise. That's a short brief, really, of sort of the problems we've had and why it's taken so long for me to do an album, because, well, at the time, at certain points during that time frame, I was unable to secure the musicians to learn the material that would eventually become what was on the album, because it was always scattered. That's why it's taken so long to do the album, because I suppose we probably didn't have the right people at the right time to do it. And it's a bit of a legacy thing, really, I suppose, for me, because it's like a lot of, at least over half the songs that are on this album, from a bygone era, like, when I was writing stuff. And so in some cases it might sound a little dated, but or rather in that 90s niche, or it should have been an album that should have been in the 90s. The trouble with those songs, they needed to be written and recorded regardless of the time era I was in. And I got still a few old songs that still haven't been written. So I was like, look, okay, I think those songs, specifically This Frail Faith and The Sin, they've always been received well live every time we played them. We looked at the songs, and obviously everybody was psyched to play them. I still enjoyed playing them, and I think those particular two, at least for me, were like, look, I think they should have been recorded a long time ago. I still think they should be recorded. I had no interest in modding them up because I don't think they needed it, because I'm not into the modern music today, really. I'm a little bit stuck in the past with music and the style and and how I think music should be in a way. I'm not overly keen on where modern music is going, and we've talked about that with AI and stuff. So it's like, look, let's get them and let's see what the reception is with them. And interestingly enough, my mate's favorite track is Frail Faith, and I'm like, interesting. And then we've played it over the years, and a lot of people seem to like it. So I was like, well, yeah, I'm gonna leave it as it is, okay? Because it should have been recorded probably back in 2006, maybe 7, when I wrote it. Yeah, around that time. So I'm like, nah.
That would make sense.
Yeah, so like I wasn't
not 20 odd years old.
Yeah, I just didn't want to take them and mod them up too much, because I'm like, well, I think they're good for what they are. Like, this was one of the goals, was to get the songs that we'd actually worked on, from beginning to middle up until the time when I lost all the members and original members, to get those songs that still stand for something, musically and lyrically, personally, because the subject matters that are on at least two of those songs are very relevant to what's going on today. And they were having those issues back in 2006 and 7. So I was like,
yeah, it's strange
Yeah.
how issues don't seem to resolve themselves, do they? Especially if an issue big enough.
well, again,
Okay, so yeah, that's cool. So as you've got the album there,
yes.
I suppose the obvious question is, where can our lovely listeners listen and buy the album?
And where can I get it from? Okay, so currently it's only for sale digitally and physically on our Bandcamp page. You go on our Bandcamp page, it's available on there and only on there for the time being. So,
okay, so for the listeners, that's Linktree, that's linktr.ee/The Shallow Souls. If you go onto their Linktree and then onto the Bandcamp link there, and you can purchase Your Merry Hearts Away. And I would strongly advise you do, or at least give it a listen. If not, there will be a link in the show notes as well for you guys to just go there and check out Adam's album, which is well worth doing. I was listening to it the other day, actually.
Well, I'd be interested
on Bandcamp.
I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on it, as and when.
As and when. Yeah, not now. This is about you, not about me. Okay. So my next question was actually, how long did this take to write? But clearly it took way too long.
Yes.
To write.
Well,
many decades. You've answered that question. So how long did this album take for you to produce? So going into production side of it, how long did it take to produce? Did you record it live or was it overdubbed? The studio you went into, was it an analog studio? Was it purely a digital? Was it a hybrid? That sort of thing. Okay. Tell us a little bit about the actual production itself.
Okay, so the production of the album was a little scattered because at the time that we had decided to do an album with Frampton on board, we'd worked on at least just under half the songs ready for the album in terms of production. So we went in to Red Rock Studios in Pengham, Blackwood area of the UK, to record with Lyndon Price, the God of Rock, who's been into music longer, since before we were born. So let's put it that way. So Lyndon's like very old school. His studio's old school. It hasn't changed in the 20 odd years that he's been doing it, which is kind of cool and unique. So we obviously we recorded the first EP in there, so it was like it made sense to go with Lyndon. So we went in for the first part of the story for the album, which would have been the EP, which was called This Woeful Bliss. I was like, we got to release something. I said, I've been doing this for so long, I need to release something. So we went in and recorded 3 tracks, which were Rapture, Darkest Window, and Imagine Dangers. And I put 2 extra tracks on there, 2 live recordings we did in my place in the practice room. And they are what they are, like very, they're literally condensed a mic hanging, and we recorded the songs that way. And I overdubbed some guitar and vocals, and that was it. So and then I was.
So was that? Was that just the rehearsal side? Was that in the studio? As the studio wasn't just a condenser in the middle.
No. So the 3 tracks, the 3 tracks that weren't done in the practice room at my place, were done in the studio with Lyndon. And so we went in, and obviously, we didn't go through the setup that you go through with your clients. Okay, we got some songs here, 3 songs. We want to get them recorded. It's like, okay, fine. Well, let's lay the drums down first. Which song are we going to work first?
Yeah.
I think it was Rapture we did. So went in, we recorded the drums first, then we done the bass, and then we done guitars and vocals last, which is how Lyndon normally does it at the studio. And it was a mostly digital. The VSTs and the guitar sounds came from some digital software and from a Kemper amp head that Lyndon uses. And there's some really dishy sounds on there. So my preference would have been to you go analog, which I'm guessing is obviously the stacks and the heads, like you go in the back there, and you record using that. Yeah, we just never go around.
See, there wasn't any kind of miking up for guitars then. It was all just
it was done
sort of DI'd straight through.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. So and it's kind of been the practice for many years, I think, for a lot of bands, unless they're specific and pushy enough for it, like, you know. So I was like, okay, well, you know, it would be nice to have done it the way you've been doing it through your short videos on TikTok and Instagram. But I was like, okay, well, let's, you know, it's been way too long. Let's get something recorded. And we did the 3 tracks, and we did it that way. And that's how we done the whole album in the end, really. So that was the process. It was easy enough. We went in. I spent a bit of time when Dave left then, up and down the studio with Lyndon. So it was me and Lyndon working on some bits and pieces to try and get the songs finished, because it was like another bombshell. I was like, oh, you know, here we go again. Like, you know, it's like
another setback.
It's just like, what the hell, like. So yeah, there's some songs where there's me and Lyndon more than anyone else, because halfway in then, I got Dean on board to help us out, who is a very, very talented and multi-instrumentalist. So we got Dean on board, same setup applied in terms of production, and that's how we finished off the second half of the album. Yeah.
So Dean he was also DI'd through.
Dean was too. Yeah, he was DI'd through as well. Yeah.
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 Okay. So nothing analog. It's all digital.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the VSTs and the effects that he's using is a lot better than what I got on my foot pedal. But you know, it worked. We found some good stuff to use, which he knew exactly what I wanted with the album in terms of sound. Like, he's both a Metallica fan too, and so he understood what sound I was trying to get. And I like to think it's damn pretty close for the album. It definitely sounds fat and full, and because of Dean's done a lot of recordings himself and with other bands, and he's done EPs and albums. So, you know, he sat down and listened, and he's a perfectionist too. So he's great to have on board, because it's like he'll tell you if it needs to be done again, if it's no good,
if it's rubbish.
Yeah, in the politest way possible, which is nice. Enough. But you know, after getting him on board and recording his stuff, he'd sit back and listen to him in the studio, and he'd be like, "Oh, dude, this is fat. This is huge. Man, this album's got to be heard." I'm like, and it was nice to hear that from somebody else, because you can sometimes get wrapped into your own little world, without any other outside.
Yeah, it's easy to be in a bubble.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, I'm like that. I'm happy with that. If you think he went, yeah. He said the layers are great, like. So that was a nice confidence booster for me. But yeah, that's how we did it. It was all digital. So
yeah. Oh, great. So with your guitars, did he stack different things, or was it just like one VST, let's just make that as big as possible? Or because what I tend to do, because I like to mic everything up and capture a sound. Yeah. But what I'll do is for Primal Damnation, the band I've just finished working with, just sent the masters off for them. We had a Randall, he had a modded Randall head. So we did with that, and we stacked that with, he had, I think one of the other amp head he had, a Laney.
Right.
Actually a very nice Laney. So he had that, and we stacked that out for the production. So that was his guitar sound. The other guitarist, he had 2 Marshalls, but he blew one of them up.
I think I remember you telling me about that.
So we ended up stacking that with he also had a dual rectifier. He didn't use this one. He wanted to use his own dual rectifier. So we stacked that with his. So we tend to do a lot of, this is how I tend to work it anyway. So I stack that to just give these guitars just a lot of power. So I'm not, because the thing I'm not overly happy with VSTs is they don't have that kind of saturation. They don't seem to have the same kind of clarity that I'm looking for. Because I'm a guitarist, I'm really quite particular.
Yeah, same here. I'm
And
very particular.
the VSTs, they can be really difficult to get power and precision, get the punch through. So to kind of get the same level of punch from VSTs, for me, I end up sort of stacking like 3 or 4 as opposed to just 2.
So we did.
Do you see what I'm saying? So kind of the time you save, you're kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul sort of thing. So the time you save setting up, you end up in processing. And plus it's just a lot more processing for your computer and stuff like that. Plus, it's not necessarily the guitar sound that guitarist wants because it's not their rig.
No, I know, yeah.
It's not what they've envisioned as such. So,
I agree.
So I'm just wondering about Lyndon's process with that, with his, especially from his guitar point of view. Did he use lots of stacks, or was there just one that he used?
What we did, we didn't stack up Marshalls or Bulgara heads and stuff. As much as I would have liked to have given it a go, we went with the digital aspect. So we used his Kemper and used the effects from the 6260 PV head, which then Bulgara did with the 5150. Oh no, the other way around. Sorry, the PV 5150. Yeah. So we basically mimic that particular sound and crunch using the VSTs with the Kemper, and then what we did then, we stacked them up digitally, and this was the cool part, right? So after Dave had gone, and we got to the second half of the completion of the album, he said, "Look, I've got some cool new VSTs and some programs I've been looking at. I'll have a listen to the sound." I'm like, "Oh," I said, "that's fucking fat and heavy." I went, "Yes." He said, "But you do realize we're gonna have to add this now," he said, to the other songs you just recorded, he said, because we need them all sounding the same. I was like, so I got to play it all again. So what we did, I had, and this is where it gets like, even up until finishing this album, it's just like, oh, what is going on here? So we layered, we had some Bulgara, some Kemper effects, we had some PV simulation VSTs on there, something else, I forget the name of it. So the second half of the album, then we layered these VSTs on, these new digital ones that he'd come across, and it really give us that sort of Black Album sound. And I was like, yeah, this sounds great. Like, so it didn't distract too much from anything really from what I originally set out to. It's just we found some other VST sounds to add to the guitar. So the guitar, we laid up the guitars quite a bit. I think I had about 4 different VST layers of effects to fatten the sound out. The bass, 1 or 2, I think that was the most. So yeah, we laid heavy on the guitars to give it that sound I was after. So yeah, that's how we did that. So when Dean came on board, we used the bass that was in the studio at the time, which was really, really nice actually. You can hear the bass, it's very, very twangy in places. So because I think the strings are fairly new as well, and it cut through real nice. So so I was like, oh, that was cool. So we made sure that was something we highlighted on the album. I didn't want it sounding like the Black Album, in the sense that like the bass was there, but is the bass playing anything? So I made that a priority. So yeah, we only really needed the one bass, but it cut through real nice.
Kind of moving on from there, I really like your artwork for this album.
Thank you very much.
I like the zombies. Yeah, what was it? Was that a general kind of concept for you? as in, I'm not saying that this is a concept album, but does that artwork particularly tie into, given that the expanse of time that this had taken to write, what made you kind of land on, this zombie apocalyptic kind of artworky thing to kind of reflect the album, or is it just it looks cool?
No, believe it or not, I cannot stand the zombie thing. Right? And it's odd because people will be like, "Huh?" I'll explain. We had a period in the band during this album, because even though like I've give you almost a shortened brief of the history of the band, right? When we had when we had Dave in the band, we were looking at the album and artwork and what would we do, a theme, etc., right? I was like, well, my dad still likes to knock around with Rorschach images and stuff, and he's always playing around with the band images and doing something with them. And he sent me some stuff, and it was a Rorschach of an image, and I was just like, I like that. I wanted something ominous and thought-provoking, so it made people question what the hell is it and what does it mean, but also have a sort of a deeper connection to what has now become the album, the songs and their meanings and so on and so forth. I was like, okay, well, we went with a different image in the beginning, but unfortunately the image was in its natural raw form was great, but obviously the image got lost within a huge amount of imagery that my dad had on his PC. So the only image I had was him taking a photograph of it on his phone and then giving it to me. And what I'd done with that, I put it in a editing software like GIMP and tried to get it to the best quality as I could. And then it became then the image that I was using for t-shirts and badges and stuff like that. I was here and I'm playing on GIMP and I'm looking at some stuff. And I got my phone and I got a program on there called Power Director. And it enables you to turn imagery into certain things like fantasy, anime, horror, cyberpunk. And I'm like, oh, cool, this is cool.
Like filters, basically.
Yeah. And I was just like, oh, let's have a look.
Okay.
Let's have a look at this, right?
Have a little play.
Let's have a little play. And I played with a couple of things. And I took one particular band image, which is a photograph.
Right, so that's a picture of the three of you. Yeah?
Yes, it's an actual picture of the three of us. And I was like, let's try that one. And I put that one in a couple of these filters. And I was like, no, okay. And then I came to zombie, and I was like, oh, zombie, really?
Zombies.
And I was like, what the fuck? So I was just like,
so passe.
I know. I put it in, and then it brought up, I think that was like the third version of it. And I put it, and I went, oh, I actually like this.
Did you curse your friend at that point? You were like,
I cursed. Fuck you. I cursed myself. I was like, but I just like, my soul likes this. This is unusual. Okay, right. And so here's the thing with it, right? It wasn't your standard cliche zombie look per se, right? And so, but what it looked like and what it started to look like after we used a couple of images was this post-apocalyptic world that was ravaged by all sorts of timeless issues we have as a human race. It didn't look like somebody had dropped a vial of bacteria or virus and it infected everybody. It just didn't portray that. And I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, it's more stylized than that.
Yeah, and I was like, I actually like this. It appealed to me. So I worked with that and I was like, okay, so how can I merge that original image that I had of my dad with this, and I went, I know what I'll do. I'll put the image, the original one my dad had, in this program and see what happens. And it brought about multiple designs of this sort of head. And I was like, okay, all I had to do is just trust my insides to pick the one that I like. And you know what it's like. You'll move across them and go, that one, you don't know why, but you just, that's the one.
Yeah.
And so
you get a feel for it.
Yeah, you get a feel for it. But it was kind of a chain of events that sort of happened. And I was like, okay. The whole point of the image on the front is basically it's a representation, because it's a Rorschach. It's not anything in particular, right? It's whatever you perceive it to be, right? So if you like refer to it as the monster, the creature, or the AI, it's effectively what we can all become if we allow ourselves to fall too far. Effectively, all those freedom fighters are the fans, effectively, and they sort of like with the collective consciousness of everybody, you can eradicate that sort of that demonic force or entity that lies within us all, or as an overall, you know. So that's kind of like the album artwork, and why I did
the concept.
Yeah, why I went down the road of the zombie thing, because it kind of worked for the idea, like, so. It was all, even though I was just like, I'm not doing all it. So.
Cool. Okay. So kind of moving on from that. I mean, previously you mentioned that you had goals. So can you tell us what your goals were specifically for this album? As in, we purely like sales goals, marketing goals, so on and so forth.
No, actually it was really quite simple. I like lots of simplistic things in my life. I don't like to complicate a lot up. So for me, I was like, look, I need to get this album done, and I need to get it out there in digital form, if nothing else. Okay. The goal was, yes, to get physical copies done. There was the financial. Obviously, financially, it's a different ballgame, because you got to get the physical copies. But in terms of goals, all I wanted to do was get this album out to the world. At the time, I priced up the vinyl I wanted. It was way too expensive, and I'm like, okay, well, that's the nearest thing I can get to something tangible, this vinyl, because that is one of my goals. And I was like, I know, I'll do a 6-page digipack. It's on CD, but okay, so CD is now dropped and vinyl's out living it again. I'm like, that's the closest I'm going to get. So let's go with that, like,
Do you feel you've achieved the goals that you set out at the start of this?
Of the album?
Yeah. So, because you had a goal of like, I want it to sound like the Black Album. I'm not sure what sales goals you had, like, for your physical. Some of it is on streaming, some of it isn't. Did you have any goals for the streaming side of things and all that sort of stuff? So,
okay. Well, that's
what was your? Do you feel that you've achieved that?
Okay, so I didn't have any major goals in terms of the streaming platforms or physical copies of the album. I'd set out to get the album done and finished, and that was kind of like the main goal. So anything else was a bonus, really. It's simple, straightforward answer. Really, I just wanted to get the album done. It was really whatever came next was a bonus, really, for me. Because digitally, it's easy. You just get it out there, and then go from there. I mean, I suppose the hardest part is getting people to listen to it, which has been the hardest part.
So, I mean, did you have any kind of troubles physically selling this stuff?
Absolutely not.
At the end of the day,
right. So yours. No. So interestingly enough, right? And there's two ways of really looking at this, but a lot of it goes from past experience. So we have sold. I set out to get some physical copies done. Now I bought 100 physical copies of the 6-page digipack.
Nice.
And that's That cost me £406, I think it was. So I'd obviously
Okay.
saved up prior to finishing it digitally, up into the point where I decided to buy the physical copies. So basically, how that works then for me is that I get all the money, the guys don't, which is pretty much what your sort of chats are about in the show videos that you do, which which is fine. Like, and they're just like, no, it's fine. It's your baby. You've invested it. That's fine. We're happy to be on it with you. We love it. Great, and all that. So I was like, cool, no problem. So it was we got it from a place called Band CDs, which I believe is up in the valley somewhere. I'm sure we can drop that in the show notes for anybody that's interested. They've done a fantastic job.
Happy to do that.
Yeah. I thought the cost was sufficient and adequate, and for what was produced and come out as the end product, I was very happy with. So I paid a little bit more than what was originally quoted, so it would have been 360 for 100. Right. I asked for half sealed, so people could just keep it without opening it. That didn't happen for whatever reason. And what I wanted originally for the album, which cost me a little bit extra, was if you look at the spine there, I wanted the imagery and the lyrics to go over the spine and fold up. And their template, they said they could do it, but obviously they said, look, there's a problem with the template in the images you sent. They had to be in the blocks rather than go over, and so that didn't happen. So it's just a minor thing, but other than that, it would have been between 360 and 400. So there's some specifics I asked for, which upped the cost a bit.
Yeah. So just for my kind of ease of math.
Sure.
So far, let's say it's £400. Yeah. Okay, it's just it's £6 is £6. So far you're looking at £4 per unit to recover your cost for manufacturing. So you had 100 printed off. So how many have you sold to date?
I have sold about 28 or 29 physical copies.
Okay.
At
what sort of price point?
£10.
£10. Yeah. So you've made, what was it, 28?
Yeah, so about 28 physical copies.
So you've made £280 from sales.
Yeah.
Wise.
Digitally.
So you're currently running. So digitally. So what about you? I'm just talking purely physical.
Okay, physical. Yeah. Well, so that's what it is so far. Yeah. Sold 28 copies at a tenner each.
A tenner each. So you made £280 so far. So you're currently £220 in the red, technically, from a manufacturing point of view. But you still have 62 copies that you can sell
and make my money back.
Which at a tenner a pop. So that, if you sell those other 62, that's another 620 quid.
Yeah, it's almost.
So in total, if you're selling them at a tenner a pop, 100, you should make £1,000 then, shouldn't you?
So in terms of investment, for what they charge me,
in terms of your return on your investment would be £600. Which if you can sell them all, that's a pretty good turnaround. Really.
Well, this is what I looked up.
Depending on
so I looked up prices. So I was like, well, look, if they're going to cost this much, I was quite happy with the price. I thought it'd be a hell of a lot more, to be honest. And then when I got the physical copies, I'm like, well, I think that's definitely worth it. They're all packed nice. They all look the vibrant colors. I mean, So I was like, cool, okay, well, that's good. So if I sell them at the most 15 quid, because it's a digipack with a couple of stickers thrown in, I'm like, I'll definitely make well over my money. I'm like, okay, so what on average, do people really want to pay for an album? Now, this is where Bandcamp helps make that decision for you in terms of digital, or what rather the consumer regards as being worthy enough for an album. So that was good to work from too. But I was like, well, I'd pay the most I would pay for an album of an unknown band would be between 8 and 10 quid, especially if it was looked like it was a lot of work gone into it, which is why I didn't charge any more or any less than what I was asking, because in my eyes, it wasn't just a dual case. It was like there's artwork, there's plenty of colors there. It's like, wow, there's a bit that's gone into that. So I was like, a tenner's good, and even if I sell them at a tenner, I make my money back if I sell all of them, and I make a bit more.
Yeah. So. Okay. And did that include things like postage and packing and that sort of thing?
No, and here's the best thing about this as well, right? Was that all all the albums I sold physically are done through all the HMV gigs that we played.
Okay, great.
And
so through live,
live
play,
and signed as well.
Yeah, so, and that's the best place to sell them. Yeah. That's where the Granite Saints, the band I worked with, they sold the bulk of their stuff. Probably 90-odd% of it was at live shows.
And what I found quite strange when we played these HMV shows, so obviously we couldn't sell them on the premises. We had to do it off premises, right? Because the logistical side and the legal side of things, which is totally fine.
Because of licensing.
Yeah. And we were easy with that. That's fine. So I was just like, okay, well, no problem. Didn't expect to really sell anything at these gigs because you generally don't sell anything. But what we found quite nice and humbling and a bit of a surprise was when we played the shows. Well, we had random people come up to us, right, that had just gone in there shopping. Mostly middle-aged people you wouldn't expect to enjoy what we were doing. Like not metalers at all, some young kids, and they were like, "Oh, can we buy an album?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure, if you like." And then some of them were like, "Oh, can you sign it for us as well?" I was just like, "Wow, this is like really strange. Never had that before." Like, and
you had your rock star.
We had a rock star moment. It was enough, man. So I just found the whole experience like it's still now. I'm just like, what happened there?
But I suppose the environment that you're in, because you're in a HMV as well. Yeah, you're there with people who like to buy music.
It's the coolest thing ever.
So it's kind of No,
playing
it's great.
HMV style, mate.
I don't know why more bands don't just play in. I mean, it used to be a thing back in the 90s. Playing record shops was like a standard thing for bands to do. They were tiny little venues within themselves. And I don't really see. I mean, mainly because there's not really any, not so many record shops anymore. But the ones that do, why they don't put gigs on as much as they used to. Okay, so kind of moving on from there, let's have a little chat about marketing. I know it's your favourite subject in the whole wide world. Did you have strategies behind your marketing for the album? Did you have a pre-release, a release, and a post-release strategy? Because you have Parabellum is like the single from it. I mean, was that released with a strategy behind it? Why did you choose that song as a single to help market the album overall? What was the kind of thought process behind that?
Well, when we dropped the first half of the album, the EP, those songs, including Parabellum, hadn't had the full well, they'd been mastered, but they weren't at the quality that we wanted. And obviously, after that, and after Dave left, Lyndon was like, okay, let's try these new VSTs, and then we had to go back and redo them. So Parabellum then became the first song that we worked on and put the new VSTs on, put Dean on there. And I was like, well, it makes sense to kind of release that one, I suppose. And we all really liked that one. And that was the one we ended up going with for a lot of reasons, really. It just gets straight in. It just seemed to work. So we chose that one. I didn't really have any ideas of trying to do a music video. I would have liked to. I did a music video for Darkest Winter, which would have been the EP release of that on This Woeful Bliss.
Yeah.
But the only reason I didn't was because it was time-based, and it's very time-consuming trying to do a music video. We obviously, none of us had the time to even venture or financial costs to go in and do something proper and professional. So we didn't.
Yeah.
And I didn't have the time even to do anything that remotely looked like Darkest Winter music video, which is a collage of imagery and psychedelic sort of black and white imagery. So we just dropped it onto Spotify, just because the problem was, see, I'd set myself a time release for the possible album release and completion, but we never got there because of the complications we had. So I was like, look, people are going to get bored and tired. My dad was saying it too. He's like, look, if you don't drop something, people are just going to get uninterested in it. I'm like, I know. But I'm like, I can't do shit about it. So when we did get the opportunity of dropping a song, I was like, look, let's just put Power Ballad out as a single. And obviously, after talking to yourself about going through the waterfall of strategy or the single at a time, I was like, well, let's just drop that, see what that gets received. At least people know, oh, okay, so something's happening. They've dropped a single, get some interest in. And I put it on Bandcamp. And that's as far as I got, really. I no other idea and for it other than that, really. I just wanted to get something that was finished, that we were happy with, that meant that the album was moving forward. And so Parabellum ended up being the first one.
Yeah. So you didn't have any kind of like, oh, we're going to do like a pre-release campaign where we're just saying singles out, albums coming on this date.
Well, yes, I did. I did do that. Again, the dates, I think they got moved a couple of times because of Lyndon got ill. There was periods where he hadn't done anything. He got quite poorly, so he was like, it all got put on hold. So I was like, right, okay. So we dropped the single. We're saying the album's due for release and end of the year or whatever it was, and that never happened. And it was like, okay, so it just went a bit Pete Tong because there was other factors that were beyond my control, so I couldn't really do a lot about it. We are now trying to find another fan base because we don't really have one, and that tends to be the problem. So I've used the socials with some advice from yourself to try and bring people in from that. But I don't think anybody that's on any of our friends list or have bought any of the album at all. They might have listened to it, but the Spotify streams is interesting for the Christmas unwrap. But like I said, there's only one track I put on there, so it's I didn't, unlike the strategy point, I didn't set out a huge thing that I was going to do. I was like, look, I've got to get this album done. I wanted to get it done, but last year I think it was. I was just like, well, I got to go with what's available to me. So as long as the album gets done, it's out there, and if I can get it in physical form, bonus. Fine. Anything else is, like I said, is a bonus.
So, what was your budget overall, and how did you budget in a way of like, okay, this is how much I'm going to spend on production, this is how much I'm going to spend on duplication, this is how much I'm going to spend on merch and artwork and marketing and so on and so forth? Or was it more, this is how much I've got, let's see if I spend it all and then add to it as I go, sort of thing? What was, do you have like a logbook of financial implications and things like that?
So I do have something logged. Basically, how I work is I go, right, okay, so how much is this likely to cost? Okay, fine. I'll save up that, and then I'll go in and I'll use what I've saved and pay for it. And do it that way. So it was a combination of both, really. In terms of getting the recordings done digitally in the studio,
Yeah.
I think I kind of set myself a head goal of what it would cost at a minimum of about £1,000.
So £1,000 for your
Yeah.
production.
So that obviously doesn't include any
Yeah.
mastering and stuff.
So that includes your mixing and your
No, it doesn't
mastering.
include the mastering. That's
Okay.
just the time.
So does Lyndon not do mastering?
He does mastering, yes. But what it was is like we go in and we pay for the studio time that we're there. Okay, so we had studio time costs. It depends on how long we're there. If it's an 8-hour day, well then yes, like you're looking at over £100 plus. If we're only there 4 or 5 hours, it's like, oh, just give me what the hours that you've stayed here for and do it that way. So it varied depending on where we were, and obviously it wasn't a smooth run-in. So the first 3 tracks were okay financially. Both contributed to the Woeful Bliss EP. But then obviously we lost Dave, and again financially he wasn't completely invested in it. And then as I say, it was just me and JJ, and it's just like, well, look, let's get it done. Like, I think there was some conversation about waiting until we're financially a bit better off, and I was like, well, look, I don't mind covering. I say, because I really need to get this album done. I've waited long enough, and he's like, yeah, sure, that's fine. So I said, that's fine. I said, give me what you can when you can. I said, it's no bother. I said, but I take all the responsibility on for it. I said, I got no issues with it. I said, it's my baby. I said, so I don't mind. I said, because if I don't do this now, I said, it's never going to get done. I said, and I'll only spend the money on strippers and hookers. And I said, that's not good either, is it? So
Magic mushroom t-shirts.
So I was like, look, okay.
Obviously.
I was like, yeah. So I said, that's fine. I said, let's just get this done. Like, I said, I won, because it'd been some years since JJ recorded anything too, like, and again, he'd been messed around so much over the years too. So I was like, look, let's do this for me and you, man. I said, so you can sit down and go, I've actually finally got something recorded, even though, it's been a long time since I did anything. I said, so let's just do it. So that's what we did.
Yeah.
Budgeted about £1,000 by the end of it, including mastering. So obviously, if a track had been done and sent and I didn't like it, which happened on a few occasions, it cost me a bit more then to get it remastered. So that I was paying for the time for it to sit and readjust everything and sort it out. Like, so so I would pay, not only would we pay for studio time, it was a mastering included for each track. So we were kind of like, well, hope this track is happy for Westo, because if Westo's not happy, he's got to go change it, which means it's more money. And of course, I went up there and did extra tidbits on my Todd with Lyndon, and I paid for that too. So all in all, I think the album production and mastering and tinkering cost about £1,500. So yeah, I mean, so that was really the running cost of like the album, and then obviously physical copies, it was like £400. So
yeah, so you spent around about £2,000. So you didn't do a run of merch or anything like that.
No, the merch was
to coincide with the album release.
It was too expensive, and to be honest, like I said, we're unknown. We don't play live enough.
Bad Life Podcast.